It's too bad we have no resignations to accept tonight, Mitch. I would have deferred to you on that. Okay, we good?
Yes.
All right, if everybody would please rise, I'm calling the meeting to order. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first up, checks over 25,000, one for 78,800 for professional designs for the Matheson Park stage. I know that they have, this is great, I get to say anything I want because Larry's not here to correct me. I know that they've been working on the plan for the electrical, running the electrical lines out there ahead of time, which will save us on the back end of this project. Second is a salt purchase. I assume they just used it up because the winter's been a little more snowy than
Yes,
expected.
multiple salt purchases, which made up this amount.
Got it. So 44, 149.61. And two things on the consent agenda. I'll just make a comment on the second one, which is approval of out-of-town travel for the police department, which I think is money well spent. It's not a lot, and it seems like a productive couple of, I think is it one course or two?
It's two separate ones.
Two separate courses, okay. So I will move to adopt the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Approval of the.
Wait, we skipped the first public comment.
Oh,
I don't
I'm
know
sorry.
if there's
Public
any.
comment now. Anybody? Nope.
No one online.
You're warming up. You get a second shot, Dave. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So this is approval of the 2024 Village of Irvington Volunteer Fire Department Service Award listing. And this is, I'll do the resolution and then I have one or two comments, but the resolution is resolved to approve the 2024 service listing for volunteers of the Village of Irvington Fire Department to be used for the length of service award plan, which is, I want to say it's effectively kind of a pension plan that pays out at age 65.
Yes,
And as I understood it from Larry, you have to have at least 50 points to
to
qualify
get 1
for
year
this.
of credit.
Got it. So you're looking at, this is what happened in the last year? Am I correct?
2024 calendar year.
Got it. Okay. Anybody have any questions? No. Okay, I will move to adopt that resolution. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Volunteer appointments. One change in this one, and that is that one of the trustees, Trustee Bloom, got onto this list. It might have even been involuntarily, but you are helping in this process. And what I'm going to suggest, if it's okay with you, and I know we've had some communication on this, is you're still a liaison, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have no objection having a second liaison? With the more the merrier to help.
Yep.
So you're now you guys can decide to be co-equals as far as I'm concerned, but so you're the second liaison. And when I make the motion, I will just omit Josie's name. And we can have a deeper discussion about this in the future, but I think the general approach I'd like to take is not to have trustees on committees that are advising the board on matters, because it gets a little confusing as to what the person's position is. We haven't done it in the past.
We do, we have it for, so I think.
You have it on DEI.
No, but we have it for RPAC too, right? It's the same thing, because
Who?
RPAC. Who's the liaison? Oh, you mean having a
Trustee
trustee as a
on the-
member and
as a
not as
member
a
of the
liaison?
committee, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
No, that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
why you're making the change.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And going forward, at least if the folks who were endorsed yesterday are elected, there's at least one of them, David, that would be you, I guess, who's got several committee positions. So you may end up becoming a liaison to those committees. You'll figure it out, or you'll just do the work. Your choice, without the glory. Okay, so the first resolution is resolved to appoint the following village board volunteer committee members Rec and Parks, William Searle, Rec and Parks Advisory Committee and Meredith Carlisle, terms expire December 2026. Theater Commission member Andy Ferguson, term expires 2027, December 2027. And further to appoint the following ad hoc committee members with a term to expire December 2025. This is the Arts and Culture Committee, Stanislav Skosik, I'm hoping I got the pronunciation right, and Julie Chapnik. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, the next one is the creation of and appointments to the Land Use Approval Streamlining Committee. And I know the two people that were about to appoint as co-chairs had some questions. They would have liked to have asked Larry, but in Larry's absence, I will talk to him tomorrow and we'll figure out a way to get everybody together. And I think those questions really pertain to, how to get the educational piece up and running and a few other things of that nature. So I'll deal with that after the fact. And the resolution is resolved that the Land Use Approval Streamlining Committee is hereby established. The committee is charged with developing proposals to streamline, simplify, and improve the approval process for land use projects, construction, renovation, and other modifications to residences and commercial properties in the village. Although not required, the committee should consider, to the extent permissible, changes in village regulations and reallocation of functions among Planning Board, ARB, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Building Department to improve the overall approval workflow, a phased approach so incremental improvements can be assessed, the impact on historic buildings, the approval process employed in other Westchester County municipalities, and work previously done by the village board and staff on this matter. And further resolve to appoint the following volunteer members to the Land Use Approval Streamlining Committee for a term to expire December 2025. Randy Huff as co-chair, David Zweibel as co-chair, Charlotte Binns as member, Jan Blair member, Phil Cohen member, Lori Davidovitz member, Sarah Gardner member, Gail Katzman member, Allison Wang member, Cesar Manfredi member, Douglas McClure member, John Price member, Rick Rizzullo member, Sasha Rudenstein member, Julie Steinmetz member, and Gail Weiler member. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Mitch, you sound like you're in pain.
I've been happier in my life before.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay. Next one is the approval of snow and ice supplemental agreement, and the 2024 through 29 snow and ice agreement with the New York State Department of Transportation. Basically what this is doing, if it wasn't obvious, is paying us to remove snow and ice from Broadway. And as I understand it, from talking to you not too long ago, we've gotten some payment for past years. I think it was 15,000.
Yes, for the past 2 years, we didn't get this year's payment yet.
Got it. And there may be a supplemental amount if I read this thing correctly, but don't count on that as we vote for it. Let's put it that way. But the bottom line is we are finalizing. Actually, yeah, it does look like there may be something, but we are basically finalizing what we have lived with for the last couple of years and putting in place something that will cover 2024 through 2029, I want to say. I'm sorry, 24, yeah, 5 year, it's a 5-year extension.
Yes.
So, okay. And the resolution is, whereas the Village of Irvington and the New York State Department of Transportation have entered into an agreement providing for the village's removal of snow and ice from North and South Broadway, now therefore be it resolved to approve the snow and ice supplemental agreements for 2022-23, 2023-24, and 2024-25 seasons, and further resolved to approve the 2024 through 2029 snow and ice agreement between the Village of Irvington and the New York State Department of Transportation, and to authorize the village administrator to execute said agreement. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Budget workshop.
Let me
Because we got to you
just,
within 10, 12 minutes here.
let me just share the document.
While you're doing this, I'm just gonna make sort of an overall statement, which is probably perhaps obvious to the rest of the board, but if we add in the overages from everybody we have seen, including the police, and I think those we have not seen, because you have the advantage of some visibility into that.
Yes.
How far over the tax cap are we?
So it's I mean, it
Like
still
30?
needs some fine tuning. And this includes departments that we haven't heard from yet.
Yep.
We're about 131,000 over.
Okay.
And I didn't send those numbers
Yeah,
out
that's
yet.
okay. I just wanted to give people a feel for sort of the delta. There are two ways to attack that, which is, one, you don't agree to increases that you see, before you, not just the police, but on a broader scale. Or two, we look for one-offs, and there are a few, like the transition of the village administrator. And by one-offs, I mean non-repetitive expenses that you can take from fund balance, because we will have growth in the fund balance sorry, I'm getting
projecting.
ahead of myself. We're
Yes.
projecting that there will be a decent, upside, which is helpful. So we're not there yet, and I think we have a March 17 meeting to debate this stuff, although we ought to be
Yes.
figuring stuff out as best we can ahead of time. And Chief, you're in the unenviable position of representing the police department. That is 21, not unenviable to represent the police department, but unenviable to be representing about 22% of the budget. You got maybe a $300,000 increase, and 2/3 of that is personnel. So it's sort of non-negotiable. We get that, which means that the other things you're asking for, I'll give you the question ahead of time, which is, you may be asked to prioritize the other things you're asking for, unless you really want to play hardball, in which case you can make us try to guess. But and that doesn't mean people might not be willing to give them to you, but it just means we have to. It will help us before the meeting ends to kind of know what are things that you absolutely have to have, and things that, okay, if they show up next year or the year after, you might be able to live with. So with that, you can take it away if you want to do the summary.
Sure. Okay, so the first line we have on here is salary increases. And it's listed as 197,720 because that is the difference between the original budget and the budget request. However, at budget time last year, the police contract wasn't settled. So last year's increase was included in contingency. So this amount here essentially is about 2 years difference, because about 127,000 of that was in contingency. So that's why it looks so much larger than it would be. And so included on this line are the PBA contract increases that go into effect. And then any non-union increases for this line for the new year are included in contingency. The second line is 8,100 for the promotion of a PO1 to youth officer, estimated to take place in December 2025. And the previous youth officer retired, was this year or last year?
Yeah, last year.
Okay.
So generally, we assign a police officer to those duties, and then after 18 months of completing those duties, they would get appointed as the youth officer. So the officer that we have there right now was placed there July of last year. So 18 months pushed us around December, January for the appointment to youth officer.
Okay, so the next line is the overtime line, which is an increase here of $26,050. And again, with this line, since the contract wasn't settled during last year's budget, about 14,000 of that was in contingency last year. So essentially, it's, $12,000 increase. The next overtime line is $5,500 for 3 additional member plug-in days, which is required by the contract.
Can I shouldn't do this, but can I ask you a question about the OT? I know we're about to embark in a process to hire additional officers. Could that number change by hiring additional officers?
For the plug-in days,
No, I'm sorry, the OT,
um,
the 26,
26,000?
yeah.
no, I think that
That's just
reflection of-
contract.
Yeah,
Okay.
just reflection of the raises that they're gonna be getting, so even if we kept the overtime hours the same, it would cost that much more.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
All right, so the next, it's a new request. It's $13,000, which would be overtime for 3 to 4 members to attend a leadership training during the year. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add
Yeah,
about
so-
that.
Throughout the year, there's various leadership training opportunities that I believe would greatly benefit the department as well as the individual officers. Some of them are held locally, but a lot of them are in way of seminars and conferences throughout the state, which includes FBI leadership classes, the New York State Chiefs leadership classes, the IACP leadership conference. And oftentimes the cost of the overtime associated with those trainings can hinder the ability to send officers to them. For the continued development of the officers themselves and the future of the department, I think it'd be beneficial to have 3 or 4 more officers per year attend some of these conferences and trainings. Usually it'd probably be more supervisor level and up, but to get people to the leadership training for, the development of the future leaders of the department, I think is important. And overtime obviously is a factor in that. Whether we have to pay them overtime if their days off, or if they're working and we have to pay somebody to cover their shift for them, that money would allow us to send 3 to 4 people throughout the year to leadership conferences.
Can I ask a question? So if you go to a conference and it's during a day that you have off, then you have to pay them overtime.
Correct. And if it's a day they're scheduled to work, then you wouldn't. But likely you'd be paying overtime for somebody to cover their shift if we're at minimum staffing.
Okay, so the next line, crossing guards, the increase is just reflective of the current salaries they're being paid. The longevity unused sick line, $4,550, that's based on the contract, and typically that'll go up as salaries go up and length of service increases. The equipment line, the $2,500 reflects the increase in the cost of a new hybrid vehicle and related equipment.
So does that mean that just the hybrid vehicle is more expensive than what we had budgeted, or is it it's more expensive to operate?
It's the price to purchase one is increasing.
Okay.
The next equipment line is removing $6,500, and that was a prior year one-time expense for interior camera replacements. The support services line, there's a $2,100 increase for the purchase of IDI core program research software for the detective division. Is there anything you want to add about that one?
That's an investigative software that's been proven very beneficial for the detective division. It complements some of the other software we use, but it's been very useful. We've been trialing it out for a little while now. And it basically allows them to access various data during investigations that you otherwise wouldn't be able to access.
The travel and education line, $8,000 is requested to expose more members of the department to trainings and to accommodate more training requests.
That goes hand in hand with the leadership, so that the other money was to cover the overtime costs associated with it. That money would be to cover the registration, hotel, travel costs with those conferences.
The next several lines are just due to increases in cost. Membership dues, 700 increase in membership dues, $75 for the business electronics, $500 for the dash cam increase, $50 for speedometers, $700 for the power DMS increase. The next line is the TASER 10 program. So the cost of the new program would be $19,150, and if that were to go through, that would eliminate $4,800 in current costs that are being incurred for a total increase of $14,350.
Chief, is
So-
that the TASER program that you had proposed for last year and that we said to wait a year on?
Yeah, so it's the same thing, you know, getting new tasers. Taser 10 came out this past year, so last year with a different model. This is the newest model. And this is also for more tasers than we currently have. This is upping our number from, we usually have 5 that are in service to 10. And the reason being is when we have multiple people on the road and on these side jobs or at events, there's not enough tasers for everybody. And it's kind of hard to pick and choose who's gonna carry it, and then if somebody gets into a confrontation that doesn't have one, you know, it's not necessarily a good thing. So I wanted to up it so that we could outfit everybody that's on the road at any time with the taser. And these are also the newest model of tasers that just came out this past year.
It's on a repairs and maintenance line, are these buying new units, or is that just you buy them under a contract to?
No, so yeah, they're brand new. It's like subscription kind of contract with Axon, similar to our body cameras and our dash cameras. So Axon is the company we get them from, and it's a 5-year contract and includes, so the contract that we have here includes 10 tasers with the batteries and docking station that integrates into our body cameras and our dash cameras and our evidence management system. The quote that we have also includes a 2-day instructor course where a master instructor will come here and instruct 5 of our officers to become instructors for certifications each year, and 24 licenses for everybody. It also comes with all the training equipment, which includes virtual reality goggles for more realistic training, a training suit, and targets. And you know, the main difference between this new system that they have now versus the old taser system. The old taser system that we currently operate is one shot. You have one shot to get it right, and that's it, and then it's done unless you have a reload. This has 10 individual probes in it, and each time you pull the trigger, it shoots one probe, which increases accuracy. The effective range is almost double, and it minimizes multiple exposures down less, so that because it's more accurate and you get better shots on target with it, it's supposed to minimize exposures.
Can I ask a question? I think I just don't remember the answer from last year, but how often are tasers used in urban camping?
Not often at all. You know, I can't even, to be honest with you, I don't even remember the last deployment we had.
Is it required that officers carry a taser?
I mean, yeah, you gotta carry less lethal, because if you don't have less lethal options, then you have no options. No. We carry, you know, batons,
Right.
tasers, some officers carry OC spray, and then,
So the requirement is some other option that's of less lethality than a gun? Or,
yeah, I mean, there's, you know, like, standard procedures, you know, mostly everybody carries tasers, batons, and OC spray. There's some specialized units that carry like beanbag shotguns and things like that. That's not on your belt, and you know, it's more specialized training.
right,
So the tasers that we have though are usable now?
Yeah, they're actually, they're 12 years old, they're 13
Okay.
years old now. We've sent them back multiple times to get repaired. Reliability of them is questionable, you know, they have.
And there's only 5 of them at
Yeah.
this point.
Yep. What's the lifespan generally for those?
5 to 7 years, so we're approaching double, you know, the general lifespan. We don't use them as frequently, so that's probably why we've been able to get those extra years out of it. But,
Like at all? Have you ever used them at all?
oh yeah, we have.
Okay.
I mean, very limited instances though. And sometimes even just taking it out gets compliance, so you don't have to actually use it. You know, people don't want to get paid, so sometimes even just taking it out would, you know, suffice.
So on the information technology lines, the 1,680 is the increase in the support costs from our IT consultant. The second line is for 4,000, and that's to purchase 2 additional computers for a total of 6 new computers. I think you had mentioned that's because there were older ones that needed to be replaced from a
Yeah.
prior budget.
Right, so we, George from A1, who does our IT stuff, doesn't like to replace all the computers at once. He kind of likes to do it, on a rotating basis so that all machines are brand new at the same time. So we did 4, we're doing 4 this year. He wants to do 6 next year because of the age of them. So that's that increase for the 2 additional computers to replace 6 of them.
And these are computers that are, I'm assuming they're laptops that can be put in the car or what?
These are desktop computers.
Desktop,
Yeah.
okay.
Then we have a decrease of 5,450 for some one-time IT upgrades that happened during this current year. Then there's 10,400, and that's made up of 5,000 for RMS support, 2,000 to upgrade the vehicle CPUs to Windows 11, and 3,400 for SIM cards for LPRs.
So the 5,000 in RMS support, I'm not sure who's aware of our RMS project with the county. I know I've spoken to a number of you before in the past about it. The county RMS project is supposed to be completed at some point this year, projected right now for June, at which point we would be switching over from our current impact system over to what the county has created. So in doing so, between data migration and just various issues that we're gonna have, IT recommended around 30 hours of support service for the switchover, overall throughout the year, which is what the $5,000 RMS support is. Our cars need to be upgraded, the computers in the cars to Windows 11 so that they operate properly. And the $3,400 in SIM cards for the LPRs directly relates to the LPR expansion program that I sent a proposal on.
Then we have 12,000 for the Puppies Behind Bars program, and that's made up of vet costs, food, vehicle equipment, and the stipend for the handler. Do you want to explain? I mean, the board knows, but do you want to explain it?
And I think that number would go down after the first year too, because some of that is one-time cost. I think it would be, close to half of that or just slightly over half of that as years go on. But it's estimated that annual, vet visits will be around $1,000, food around $1,000, and then the stipend for the handler. The rest of the stuff would be initial fees to set the vehicle up and some other stuff. And then it would be closer to, probably closer to $8,000 per year moving forward.
Then we have the parking line. And on the salary line, there's an increase of 20,887, and that's made up of current salary, and then also there's a request for 15,000 to give the police, the parking enforcement officer, a dual title of parking enforcement officer and code enforcement officer. And then on the line below that would be an estimated 10,000 increase in revenue from issuing additional summonses for a net increase of 10,887.
I have a question there. So I know that his time is not gonna increase, right? His hours will be 8 to 4. So I'm assuming if he is doing less parking enforcement and he's doing code enforcement, that equally the parking tickets have to reduce.
Well, he's not gonna do less parking enforcement, so the system that he currently uses now, which is from what we used to do with the chalking, the computerized system makes it so much more efficient that he has time in between when he's waiting for, time limits as he's looking for other violations, that he can handle additional duties, as far as code enforcement. So I've spoken to him in depth about it. He's very confident that he could maintain the level of enforcement with parking while still having time to take on additional duties for code enforcement.
And I mean, some code enforcement things have been suggested, like, items related to Halsey Pond or the woods, but are there others? Are we talking about building code violations, or I mean, presumably that's the building department that's handling that kind of stuff?
Correct. I've spoken to Ed about it
Yeah.
as well, and, his involvement with building code violations would be if he sees construction going on and doesn't see a permit, outside on the window, to just make a quick phone call to the building department and keep going, and just basically advise him that he just, if there's construction, he can check on whether there's a permit or not. He wouldn't be getting too much more involved in that.
Got it.
I mean, do you wanna measure, I guess, like, increased number of fees, or do we wanna decrease the number of, like, incidents of, like, violations happening? I feel like it's more the latter.
Yeah, to get more compliance with
Right.
ordinances, yeah.
So I think the one question I have is then, like, do we want this, like, covered by increased amounts of, like, like fees? Like, I think it's more like, I'd almost be more pleased if they went down, like, if we had less
Oh, yeah,
incidents. And then the money would have to come from somewhere else. I
well,
think
right,
it's-
yeah, the only reason why I wanted to include that is because I was asked a few times just to
course.
estimate the amount of tickets that might be written and stuff like that, and I just based that off of leaf blower responses and unfounded calls that might be
Totally.
mitigated.
But
yeah,
long term,
and-
hopefully it's less.
Right.
Right, and then I think if there's a concern about like the amount of money that we have to raise, then it would have to come from another location. So I didn't want to bring that up, but I think, there's value in decreasing that. I think it's actually.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You can't go into it with, I mean, you can have an estimate of what you think the fees are gonna be, but tasking the police with bringing in a certain number of dollars is probably not where you wanna go.
No, I think it's problematic,
Yeah.
actually, I think we don't want that, I mean, I think what the ideal is they are patrolling and going to like the parks and like there's
Yeah.
fewer violations, the pond is no longer an issue, right? Like,
Yeah.
we wanna see it cleaned up more than we wanna see $5,000.
Yeah.
Right?
I would agree with that.
I guess I have an issue with this because I think that like part of community policing, the way that I think of community policing, especially as I think of Halsey Pond and the fishing issue, to me, that is more of like a educational campaign by the police, right? I think part of like having the bikes is so that the police can go and patrol like in the woods and in Halsey Pond. So I don't really see how he's gonna do that in his car. And I also feel like that's maybe not the best person, right? Like I think when I think of the woods and I think of kind of enforcement in the woods, to me, it's more of an educational thing, which is you have usually people who maybe don't understand or know the rules, right? So it's much easier if you have a police officer who knows people and is gonna go in there and like sort of like talk to people about what the rules are and what we're trying to accomplish. And rather than the parking enforcement person who people already have a negative relationship with from jump,
Right.
So I think I don't see that working well, actually. I feel like what's gonna happen is it's gonna seem more like the ticketing, right? That this is really more of a ticketing mechanism that we're sending in the parking
Yeah.
enforcement officer to generate revenue. So that I have kind of a conceptual issue with. And then I have sort of a wish that from the community policing side, that it's police like friendly in the woods and in Halsey Pond doing kind of like the educational piece with and kind of community relations piece, rather than this like, ticketing person, which is it's a different relationship. And I don't see it working, but I see, again, remember like from the police reform that the bikes, right? Like we talked about more community policing, more interaction with people. I think what happens in the woods, even if you think about dogs off leash, you're gonna have like that one person who just doesn't follow the rules. And eventually, by the way, the police are gonna have to ticket that person, You can only encounter the same behavior without ticketing, and then that person's gonna deserve a ticket, right? But the person who's up there doesn't know that you can't walk with your dog unleashed, I think deserves a warning.
Sort of following up on that, if it's the police that are the primary enforcers of what you just described, talk a little bit about staffing, because how many people you have on at one time, and what, like if somebody's biking through the woods or Halsey Pond and there's a call out,
Right, yeah.
so, and I'm not, that's not a setup question, I wanna
No,
understand. Yeah,
I
Let me,
understand
let me
that
just,
too.
I guess, try to, start from the beginning with that. Just because he's doing code enforcement doesn't not allow him to do education. Actually, you know, we prefer education first before enforcement, with everything, as much as we can. Because we don't wanna create negative interactions with the community and the police. So, just to say he's gonna go out there and just, you know, blanket ticket everybody, it's not gonna be that. It's gonna be more of an education and compliance with the ordinance, and if there's, you know, somebody that is continuing the behavior that's, you know, a violation, then it would be a ticketed situation. So he's not just gonna go and issue tickets, you know, across the board, he's gonna be able to educate people as well. And, you know, what relates to like the staffing level and the police being able to go into the woods and things like that, it's easier for us to send a civilian code enforcement officer into the woods or into Halsey Pond to walk around, educate people and do enforcement than an officer, because if we only have minimum staffing on the road, we can't risk an officer being in the middle of the woods and then have a priority call come over and they can't get to it in time. You know, a heart attack, medical aided, serious, you know, crime that's occurring. So when it's minimum staffing, which is oftentimes the case, there's only 2 officers on the road, they both have to be available quickly enough to respond to emergency call. There will be times, sometimes, where we do have an additional officer on the road, and at that time, we could potentially send somebody in, as long as there's nothing else going on and nobody else took off, or there's no training that day, or there's all these other variables that come into play that wouldn't provide for consistent enforcement, and I don't think you would see really any more compliance with the ordinance if it's not consistent enough. Whereas a code enforcement officer could consistently go in there and be visible, and, you know, even just take a walk around there would probably help with the compliance.
Can I just a minute? So I've thought a lot about what I agree with you about the educational component. I think that's very important, and I feel like, you know, we both attended the thing about the puppies behind bars, and it seemed like it seemed like that you guys wanted to like focus, and really good for our community to focus on community relations. Like, I think, I mean, almost separate from this conversation, that seems like an important priority for us to like build that relationship with the community. What I'm hearing though is like the education piece would be like, let's educate people when they're doing something wrong, but like, could we do like preemptive stuff, like where we teach folks about like the right way to do fishing, if we're gonna use that as the example, so that it doesn't necessarily have to be like a response, like we have to have a 4th person to run off to the pond to deal with it. Like, we can plan that out and have like education components that we train folks who are interested in being like fishermen and what the right protocols are. I think that actually has a history. I believe that used to be something that we used to do as a village.
Yeah,
I think
and
by the history.
just because it's coming up, I think we have a meeting with you and Larry and the head of RPAC to sort of, we wanted to have the input from this discussion, but to also talk about what can we do. Fishing was the specific example, because maybe it's RPAC's or Rex department's role to do the educational piece and not the police. But that doesn't mean there aren't other instances where the police could be doing an
Well,
education.
there's a whole slew of codes
Yeah.
we're talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I mean, also I have another question. I think, like, absent the parking officer who doesn't do that now anyway, is there any policing of Halsey, you know, is there any police presence in Halsey Pond and or the woods?
So the pond, yeah, they'll drive in and drive through and around. And so they do police that. The woods, the trails, only when we get calls in there. Because once again, we can't risk an officer being in the middle of the woods, you know, 10 minutes trying to run back to a vehicle when there's an emergency response call. So we don't routinely go in the woods. What we do is we do park walk and talks in the parking lots going into the woods, the O'Hara Nature Center, in those locations. And we do the preemptive education about leashes and things like that, because the woods is predominantly dogs off leash. So in the mornings when it gets busy, we have a cop that goes up to O'Hara Nature Center or off of Cyrusville Road. They park in there, they talk to people. So we do stuff like that.
so
We
if,
don't go into the woods
sorry,
unless we have a call, you know, that we need to.
Do we advertise that at all? Like that happens, like any kind of like, we're doing trainings about like, or like,
No,
what's
it's
the
not,
right ways?
it's not formal training. We
Right.
have a policy that's called park walk and talk. Everybody else has to do them every day. They park their car to get out, they walk and talk to people. They do them in the parks, senior center, the woods, anywhere basically. We do them every school. We do 2 a day. So it's a pretty known thing if you see them out walking around.
Sure, I mean, which sounds great.
Yeah,
I was wondering, like, advertising it a little bit, like there's things about like different issues going on in the community, like maybe schedule some time, like and get more people to be part of that, learn about what the issues are.
yeah, we'd definitely be interested in doing that and, helping like the educational part of stuff, we get a group of people together.
So on the fishing and dogs, to use them as examples, could this be sort of a combined committee and police activity where they're sort of, we're not deputizing people because you don't want them confronting anybody, but where they're just seeing a problem and calling the police, so that you're a policeman or whatever we end up with, code enforcement, police, are going in for this specific incident as opposed to just wandering through the woods. Or, Halsey, I understand you're circling because I see the tire tracks anyway.
Yeah.
Is that something that might be helpful? Is that how you get the calls to begin with?
Sometimes, yeah. The only issue is, especially if it's like repeat offenders and things like that, if we don't witness a violation, we cannot write the ticket for it, right? So it's the same thing with the leaf blower situation. If people call and we show up and it's not being used at the time, we can't write the summons for it. So the only way we can get, if we're writing summonses for, especially for repeat offenders, would be to witness it, which would be having, dedicated patrols at times, whatever. It'd be helpful to know from those people, like, the times of the day where there's the most, violations and things like that. But to respond to one specific incident and then be able to mitigate that, there could be value in it if the person, really didn't understand and now is educated on the rule, and then they follow the rules from now on.
Do you ever like look at the data about like this happens repeatedly in the same place and then go back like to check on it in the future just to see if it's happening again, like a similar pattern?
That leads into our records management system from 90, early 90s.
Yeah.
Can't really run too many accurate reports like that. So, I mean, the schedule rotates so frequently with the police that sometimes you might be there 2 or 3 days in a row and they might not know right away that we were there yesterday, or something like that. But they do kind of know what companies, like going back to like leaf blowers, what locations they're coming up a lot, what companies that we've warned in the past before and stuff like that. For the dog, loose dogs, I can't say it's as frequent or, so I don't know.
I kind of want.
Leave frequently on the schedule though.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitch. No,
I'm
it
sorry.
was just.
It's just hard to participate on Zoom. I apologize. I've been waiting to ask about the leaf blower situation. The thing I'm trying to wrap my head around, and the chief, maybe you can help me, is you've said several times that if you don't catch the people using the leaf blowers at the time they're using it, you can't write a summons. So how would it be helpful to have a code enforcement officer to catch more of them if you need to see them anyway?
So the code enforcement officer, while he's driving around, looking for parking violations as well, if he witnesses them, he could take action at that point.
Shouldn't the police also do that?
Yeah, they do, and we've written tickets doing that as well. But they have a lot more competing duties than the parking enforcement officer do. They have, various other things that are going on throughout the day besides responding to calls for service, crossings, park walk and talks, different training they're attending. So it's not as consistent as it would be with somebody that's there from 8 to 4 every day driving.
I just don't see how he could do, I don't see how he could do that. I mean, I don't see how it would be that different, because if he's doing parking enforcement and then running, like going around looking for infractions, like in my head, in the 8 to 4, I don't see how that would be any different than the duties that, you know what I mean? Like how he's gonna run around catching people, I don't understand. So I guess my concern is, sort of what's the view of enforcement of the leaf blower ban? Because if you guys are riding around and if you see it, I think it should probably be treated like any other violation. It you should stop and sort of give a ticket if that's required. I think this issue of having to see them, he's not gonna have, it's gonna be sort of difficult for him as well. So I guess I'm struggling with the value of that, and especially, I guess my biggest concern, I think you started with my concern, which was this is like 50, close to 50% of the increase that we're allowed to have for the tax cap. So I think what I'm gonna wanna hear from you is what you asked for, which is what are the priorities, because I don't think we can do all of this. So I obviously have my bias about whether I think that would be effective, so, I just wanna know what you think are the most important things, because, I think we're in a tough situation with the budget.
Of the new thing,
Yes,
basically.
yes.
So if you, and I know we're making you work against your own interest. We acknowledge that up front, but you got a higher likelihood of perhaps getting the thing that you find most precious, if you identify it for us.
But he doesn't have to tell us now. He can go back and work this
No,
out.
that's
Yeah.
true, that's fair. Yes, you can think about it.
Yeah, and then I think I have another question. I guess my other question, and I think I ask this question every year, which is, just somebody remind me about the cars and like how often we have car replacements and whether, that, what is the car replacement schedule?
What is it for police vehicles?
5 years.
5 years, is that standard?
Yeah.
And is it regardless of mileage? I assume you're running up hundreds of thousands of miles.
The mileage, no, it's not, the mileage
Not that
doesn't get
bad?
too high, it's just the wear and tear. They run 24/7.
Yeah.
They're not like a normal vehicle that gets driven by one person that, a couple hours, maybe a week. They're 24/7, they're driven by 16 different police officers, emergency responses, hard braking, fast acceleration, a lot of turning. So it's just the reliability of the vehicles after 5 years.
How many cars do we have?
Patrol vehicles, 5 marked patrol vehicles.
And what else do we have? How many police vehicles in total?
But there's 10. There's 5 marked patrol vehicles. There's the Ford Lightning pickup truck. That's not patrol rated, so it gets used for side jobs and things like that. 4 admin vehicles, which includes the admin and detective division. And then the parking enforcement vehicle. The Leaf,
11.
yeah.
What kind of jobs does the pickup do? Like you said, side jobs?
Yeah, so you see it for directing traffic, kind of stuff like that. And then like other duties outside of, if somebody has to go somewhere for a training class, things like that, that don't require emergency response, because it's not pursuit rated.
And those cars are also replaced every 5 years?
No, just the patrol vehicles more so. The other vehicles, the admin vehicles and things sometimes last quite a bit longer.
Out of curiosity, like why do we have 11 when there's 3 people working out at any particular moment? Like what's the rationale?
So there's 5 marked patrol vehicles. 3 is the minimum staffing. So we have a traffic officer that works every day, that's 1 vehicle. 2 patrol, that go out, so that's 3. If there's a 4th person working, that would be another vehicle. And then we use the truck plus another vehicle for side jobs. And then the administration detectives use the other vehicles, the ones that are, that don't have markings on them. Mostly the black ones, and we have 1 gray one now. And then obviously the park enforcement vehicle.
So if they're going out on it and doing an investigation, for example, the detectives might.
Yeah,
And that's in addition to the 3 that you have standardly on the job, like who are doing 2 patrol people at one
right,
person in the building.
yeah.
And what's our total force now?
24.
That's fully staffed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fully staffed.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's
Not
24,
right at
that's
this-
so 11 cars and 24 people. That's a lot of
That,
cars.
that'll be after we hire.
Yeah, once
Yeah.
it's fully staffed, yeah.
So 11 cars seems like a lot for 24 people.
There's many days where we don't have 1 car available, where we're using all of them. So, I mean, it happens pretty frequently.
Yeah, I think probably the real question, and you may very well be right, but is pick an ordinary day, how many people are here and actually need a car? You got
Yeah.
3 or 2 plus the parking enforcement. And then if your detectives are out working, you might have 1 or 2 more.
Right.
And I'm assuming you have a car as chief.
Yep.
So that gets you to 6 to begin with. And then there's the pickup truck and what else?
So we have, there's always the traffic unit is out, is one, minimum is 2 in patrol. There's like, obviously lately, there's 2 vehicles assigned to side jobs. The park enforcement vehicle, that's always out. Detective, we have 3 detectives, that are out and about, you know, in and out, and then myself and the 2 lieutenants that are, you know, in and out. So there's, you know, last week, I think actually when trustee Bloom came to visit me a week or 2 ago, whatever, we didn't have any cars available. They were all being utilized. And generally, there's 1 or 2 that are down for maintenance. Right now, we have 1 marked patrol unit that doesn't have an operational seat. The seat's stuck all the way down. It can't be utilized for emergency response, so.
On a typical day, how many people are working? Because I guess I hear a minimum of 3, but I'm getting confused, like
So that's patrol, and
patrol.
then you have a traffic person,
So you have minimum of 3 people patrolling,
correct.
1 traffic.
Well, one of those 3 are desk, is the desk sergeant.
Okay,
So 2 on, 2
Two on
on,
the
2 are
street,
patrol and
1 on,
one's-
right, is patrol. Then you have a traffic enforcement officer, parking enforcement officer, anywhere from 1 to 3 detectives depending on the schedule, and 3 administrators.
okay.
So
So
10
usually
roughly
half the force is here.
10, yeah, roughly 10 people, you know, I mean, Monday through Friday, weekends are less, because detectives and the administration don't work weekends generally. So weekends could be 3 to 4 people, and that's during the days. Night,
Who
overnights,
supervises during the weekend?
sergeants.
Sergeants. Okay. I don't have any more questions.
Yeah, I'm just going through it,
Yeah, yeah.
see what I have. Just maybe talk a little bit about the license plate reader. This was, as I recall, adding to existing readers. Am I remember correctly, it was towards the Dobbs Ferry side we would add one, or am I imagining?
So to expand the license plate reader
Yeah.
program, so that was based off the New York State Law Enforcement Technology Grant that I applied for last year and that we were awarded. And it's the addition of 7 license plate readers to supplement what we currently use. And basically what position license plate readers to cover the entrances and exits to the village, so that would greatly enhance our criminal investigation capabilities.
So it was a grant. So how much was the grant? Do you remember?
The total grant that we received was $246,000.
Yeah, I mean, this particular expense is $3,400.
Correct. I think the whole, there's around $150,000 for the license plate reader program, for the hardware and setup and everything.
I think that might actually have been my questions. Anyone else have anything? So I guess it wouldn't hurt if you went through, you don't have to do the small ones, but some of the bigger items that, you know, if you said what you think is your priority, and if you wanna, you know, email it to the board or to Larry to pass on to us, it's not a bad idea. It just gives us some perspective. Anything else on this? Or
No.
You good?
That's it
Okay.
for me.
All right, if there are no more questions, and you wanna head out of here, you're
Sure.
welcome to
Yeah.
do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll get back to you with the, you know, the list of priorities.
Okay.
Thank you. That's really the last question.
Kent, I think it was you who was looking for like scheduling information, but that was coming out from Larry, yes. so that-
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I had just been curious. I think it was largely part of this conversation.
Okay.
Code enforcer, but I think we could have took a different turn. So
Okay,
that's-
no
If
problem.
you have any additional, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just
Or-
also just very curious how you approach things. So
Yeah.
I might just want to come by and maybe sometime.
Yeah.
Anytime.
So later.
Well, and it'll probably come up anyway, because if we're interviewing, you know, for a replacement officer,
Yeah,
we'll.
I'm just
we'll
curious
have
how,
to-
honestly, I like to know how the systems work, so for
Yeah.
my own learning. to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
You're the best
Thank you.
computer around.
reports of board standing committees and officers, the trustee liaison reports. Kent, you wanna go first?
Mine is just honestly very brief. Right now I've been trying to meet with all the folks related to all the discussions around streamlining. So I've been meeting with, or trying to meet with ARB and planning board. So I've had some conversations with them, just trying to address their concerns, but, which they have any of, like how this may go, and so we can go into it. It's not specific so much, it's more just like trying
Understood.
to address those concerns.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that because we'll try to make sure that you're also, if there's gonna be a gathering with Larry, you should be there
Yes,
as well.
I'm very interested in participating.
And if it has to be, we'll figure out how to do it online, to accommodate if you're in the city or something. Okay, Rosie, you got,
So multiple roadway curb repairs and snow and ice removal over the last month by our trustee folks at the DPW. Also, our Green Policy Task Force, waste reduction attended a Westchester County Department of Environmental Facilities, to figure out how we can do waste reduction on a county-wide level. So there were some ideas coming from GPTF that they wanted to bring to a county level in terms of reduction of waste and potentially exploring more sites for food scrap processing into compost. So I will report back out on that when we have report from the volunteers who attended the meeting.
Mitch?
Yeah, I don't want to have too much because I am having trouble speaking. But one thing is, I know that the theater is looking for their pool of tech. So if you know anyone who does sound or light or anything like that they can contribute to, because as you know, the model is now that they've reopened is that when somebody rents the theater, they have to pay the staff. So it's not, we're not paying them. The event is paying them, but we have to have a pool of people to provide them. And Greg's finding the pool to be too shallow, so he wants to get more techs into the pool. So spread the word to anyone you know who knows how to do any of the work around a theater, because we're looking for people.
Got it, thank you.
So from RPAC, the Irvington Fire Department sponsored a luncheon for the senior citizens this past Saturday. I want to thank Ron Lilo and Chief Ruffalo and the IFD. Teamscape registration began yesterday, February 25th. Day camp registration begins on March 12th, and job applications for summer camp are now available. 16 years and older apply soon. Be sure to check Community Pass for program information for toddlers through adults. The rec department is always looking for new programs. If you have a talent, email the superintendent. Also from I Ask Cab. It's really, so on Thursday, March 6th from 3:30 to 5, they're gonna have their student run volleyball tournament, returns for a second year. Kids from CAB and the high school's Positive Impact Club created an event to spread awareness about students with disabilities. The tagline is "Fight the Stigma, Set the Standard." Other messaging gets shared between matches, CAB supplies snacks and t-shirts for the teams. And there's a poster which maybe we should send out for them. And then also, even though this just passed, but during Super Bowl week, students from the high school and middle school placed stickers with CAB's drug and alcohol-free messaging on close to 500 pizza boxes at Tony's and Capri, or Capri maybe. They were delivered to homes throughout the community on Super Bowl Sunday and the days that followed, which is kind of cool. I thought that was very cool. Okay, and then I also have from the Woods Committee.
While you're digging it up, I'll
Yeah.
say that Judy and I attended the senior luncheon and it was kind of fun. Apparently I wasn't qualified to serve, so I got to be a backbencher, but
Did you qualify as a senior though?
yes, I do that too. Although I was about to say, the seniors aren't bashful about sharing their opinions on many issues. So now I could be one of them, I guess, you're right. Go ahead, sorry.
Me too, I'm probably gonna be there too, right there with you. Okay, so I got a lot of highlights from Zoe, because they had a meeting with many things, but I'm just gonna focus on a couple of things that they wanted to highlight, which is the USDA American Forest Grant funding has been suspended because of the executive order. And I know they're trying to figure out other ways to
Right.
kind of to sort of meet the needs there. new DEC joint Rivertown grant application is underway. It's due March 12th. And then the bikes off trails, plans are in the works to invite members of the bike community to meet with the Woods Committee to discuss the needs and challenges.
On that DEC grant. I think Monday we're gonna see, I think it's a contract with the forestry expert that we needed, that's gonna deal with all of the towns, so
Yeah, right, the joint,
you'll,
yeah.
yeah.
And also on Monday's consent agenda will be a budget transfer request using some of the salary funds since
yeah.
CJ
Unused. Yeah.
hasn't been
For the
here
forestry
to,
stuff.
yeah, kind of
Good.
cover
Yeah.
some of that work.
So I think it's important for people to know how we're trying to make it work while
Right.
we have the
Yeah.
this funding pause. If people don't think that affects us, it obviously does affect
Yes,
us.
definitely.
So that's it for me.
Okay. I guess we're not gonna get a village administrator's report, so,
All I have is, next up on the budget, Monday is, recreation and parks. And then the following Wednesday is DPW, water, sewer. Then we have one meeting before the tentative budget needs to be filed on March 20th.
20th, okay, yeah, I probably got the date wrong. But we could also use time, if there's time in that work, following the presentation at the work session to talk about some budget issues if we want to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should also just encourage people, if they have comments on the budget,
Now would be the.
now is a great time. You know, I think now is a great time, even if they want to send an email, if they don't want to speak at a public meeting, but all of the materials are available, right? They've been
Yes.
available attached to the agendas.
Yeah.
People can watch the meetings, but, you know, obviously we welcome input. Because especially when we're gonna have to, right, we obviously
Make
can't
some
do it, we're gonna make
decisions,
some
yeah.
decisions, it would be nice to get some input.
Agreed. Village attorney, anything to report? No? Okay, then, public comment. Thank you. Oh, no, you're gonna go.
I do want you to get out.
All right. You gotta stretch your legs.
Right. Just three quick little comments on other stuff just mentioned. That agenda of which budget is being, at which meeting, could we get that out in a mayor's letter? Because it's not like obvious.
Yeah.
You go through the website and I'm sure it's in there
Yeah,
somewhere.
or at least the village email. What, we have, what, 2 departments left, rec and DPW?
Right, but.
Yes, rec and DPW. It was attached to the budget overview in the beginning, but it probably got lost in the shuffle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's
and
fine.
what the dates are for the upcoming, whatever, so that would be helpful,
Or
thank
the,
you.
right, the dates that happen, so people can follow, you know,
Okay.
find them if they're interested in them.
Okay, so simple item, move
Got it.
on. Mitch, I don't know if it still exists, but the tech people at the high school plays are really, those guys are so, they used to be, I have been up there in a while, but I am sure that if they're anything like they used to be, they would love part-time jobs, being tech at the theater.
I'll mention it
So
to Greg. I know they're looking at some of the local universities, but I don't know if they're looking at the high school, so I'll mention it to Greg. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, those high school kids are like, some of them have been like so gung-ho with tech, it's like out of control. Anyway, so that's my main reason for coming here, though, is woods, dogs off leash, bikes out of control, and code enforcement officer. The frustration of having rules and no method of enforcement is just beyond belief with the Woods Committee, et cetera. This dog's off leash, so we just keep hearing about it. And it's like, so the idea, I mean, great, spend 15 grand more and get a code enforcement officer who's gonna solve this problem. That may be a nice idea, but I don't see it in anything that's been put out as to the mechanics of how that's going to actually do anything. And a couple points on the mechanics, whether it be code enforcement officer, whether it be a policeman, I don't care who it is, but And I know the Halsey Pond folks are like, they want to enforce no fishing or whatever they want to enforce. It's just crazy that I don't want to put up another sign that says no anything that we can't.
Well, even if we wanted to do whatever the rules permit now.
Exactly, yeah.
The question is, how do you get people to know what they are and comply with it?
So, I don't want to have anything to do with spending $50,000 more to not get any better enforcement. So, I have a couple questions. One, how ironclad is this rule about witness it? Is there any, this is maybe Mary Ann's territory, but is there any way that we can have something that we can do to somebody, whether it be an official warning and a numbers of warnings or whatever, that we don't, and really, are they going to challenge us in court?
Mary Ann can probably answer this better, but my take would be, actually, we got other lawyers here too, but.
Right, exactly.
That you'd need a witness, and even if it's not the enforcement officer, you'd have to say to the next door neighbor, hey, you heard the blower, right? They shut it off by the time I got here. Will you come to court on the day this person is presented? I think you're gonna have a low probability of a lot of people doing that. But am I even close, Mary Ann, or, I backed into it? You're on mute, I think.
Yeah, that's the issue, and I assume that's why that's the police's policy not to do it if they don't see it, because otherwise they've got to, bring a court action, get the person to court.
But, well, let's,
If people want to.
In fairness, I don't do prosecutions in the village. I never have. So,
Well, when I met with Frank, I had asked about that same thing, about the witnessing and
Yeah.
how, and he had said, like, there is a mechanism where if the person who witnessed it is willing to do an affidavit and then appear, but that doesn't happen too often.
yes, but every single time I've ever gotten a speeding ticket anywhere, you get the choice. You can take this and take it to court, or you can just pay the fine or plead. And as what I understand is most people just, they don't
But
fight it.
usually if you're getting the speeding tickets because the policeman witnessed you or they had a speed gun.
Yeah.
You're saying, like, for people, like, that the witness wouldn't have to go to court?
But no, I'm not saying that.
Actually, if the policeman
I'm
doesn't
saying
show up for the speeding
you're-
ticket, you don't get convicted. You can't.
you're placing the onus on the perpetrator. They have to show up. It may be dismissed, but they still have to show up or pay a ticket. So do we have to really make it so that every T is crossed in order to serve somebody something? I'm just asking that question I don't want to necessarily prosecute somebody to hell because they did this, but I would like to make life a little more difficult for them. And is there a way to do that, either with a warning or a summons or a something or other? I don't know.
I think, I don't, not to interrupt you, but I do think that we need to look at this more, because I still think that all of these questions, which were the same questions we had about the police enforcing, is exactly the same questions that are still not answered about the parking enforcement. So I don't think we dealt with that issue.
Yeah.
So, I feel like we haven't had any growth from last year when we discussed this, and that it's not gonna change, I don't think it's clear, so how are we gonna, I don't know.
And
You
the
have
one
to
thing
kind of
I
know
would
what
like-
you're doing before you go forward.
I agree completely. It's just like, I really want an enforcement officer up there enforcing it, but I don't want you guys to spend 15 grand for it and have the same circumstance. The other suggestion I have for the woods at least, and maybe Halsey Pond, is do we want to invest in some cameras, solar powered, that can actually get license plates from the
Yeah.
cars that are parked, that the dogs are coming out from, and actually record the dogs popping out of their car off leash. and have that available as a enforcement mechanism. And maybe that's cheaper than having our expensive policemen going up there into the woods at times. The perpetrators for the woods, both on bicycles and for dogs, are the same people, and they tend to come at the same times. And they're just like, it's like the guy driving to work down Harriman Road at 50 miles an hour. He comes down there every morning and he's going to work, and that's it. So and he does it every day until he's stopped. So I think if we had some cameras, maybe strategically placed, we could identify some of these people. Or when one of our, workers in the woods or citizens sees somebody, they can report that person, and then there's a way that the police could identify them based on their license plate from their car that they just got out of. Because I know citizens really don't want to approach other citizens in the woods.
Right.
I mean, it happens now, and it's a little scary, reports that I've gotten from that. It's like they're confronting this guy with the dog off the leash, who's like, we don't know what that dog's going to do to them, sort of thing. That's the bottom line. We really would like to be able to enforce these rules that we have, and before we spend more money.
Yeah, I think we share your sentiment, right? And
Yeah, and I'm guessing that if there were signs about the cameras that would have
some deterrent effect,
some
yeah.
deterrent effect, like cameras in use recording. right?
Yeah. And now they would have to be the solar powered ones, but that's sort of common nowadays. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how many millions of dollars anything costs, but it's probably less than the pension fund for the guy that we're putting in to stay up there. And I'm like listening to the Park Walk and Talk program and trying to understand how that fits into we don't have enough people that we have to spend lots of overtime money to send them away for someplace. Those numbers, as well as the vehicles, just didn't seem to be adding up in my mind, but that's up to you guys to deal with.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you, David.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
Actually, can I, one last
Yeah,
thing
of
before we
course.
close up, I just wanted to put this back in the radar, a comment the chief said about like the computer systems are being so old that they can't run reports to track like patterns and incidents. That does seem like concerning to me, because like it seems like that would be an obvious like first step. The repeat offenders are probably frequently doing it in the same
It sounds like a
place.
software thing, not a hardware thing.
Right.
Right, but I wonder if there's like something that we could actually think about and look at and see if there's something.
Josie, since you met with him, you had a chance to ask that question, or?
Well, I asked not a question about like pattern, but I asked a question about like, I was just curious about crime rates, and they have information that's on the website about, the totals, but not grouped by like crime. Like I was curious about like what kind of crime is most prevalent in Irvington, and like
Can they not do that? They can't.
they can't do it that easily right now with the current software, right? So, I mean, it's the things you would expect in Irvington. It's, fraud, it's burglaries, it's speeding, and those kinds of things. But I think it would be useful to have a more detailed layout of crimes, particularly when we're talking about tasers that are never used, right? I mean, we don't have a lot of violent crime here.
How many times was the taser used, and what were the exact reasons they were used from in the last year?
I mean,
I
I did wonder that too. I mean, he's probably right about the preventative side of it.
Right, I think the
But-
counter to that is, well, when that time comes, would you rather them use a gun?
Right.
And
Yeah,
the
and-
answer is,
Last
But
year,
do
Right.
I asked the chief that question last year, and he said he is pretty sure that in the previous year, they had never used it, but he made that point. He said, but when you go to actually use it, if it doesn't work, that's problematic,
Yeah, that's true. That is a good point.
Still.
But I do wanna go back to like the computer system, because
Yes.
like if you wanna solve this code enforcement issue, like it sounds like these things keep happening over and over again. Like my experience with the leaf blowers is it's the same house repeatedly.
Yeah.
Like I could solve the problem if I
Maybe you should take the police exam.
I am not suggesting that in the
I
least,
heard, I heard it's
but
coming up.
I mean, I could solve
Yeah,
literally
you can
one
take it now.
incident,
But,
one, but
I'll
just
give
the
you-
point being though, it's just repetitive.
I'll
And
give
so
you an
it-
easier,
you know,
an easier route than the police exam. If you wanna frame it in an email and just maybe send it to Larry and the chief and.
I would love to
Yeah.
know, like, I mean, I've heard this kind of
Yeah.
explanation of issues happening with computer systems for other departments too. And it seems like some things are like dated are causing some problems.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I don't know if it's like an expensive fix, but like, if we could say, have whoever it is, whether it's a police officer, or code enforcer, or whoever we decide, like, why don't you go to the place where it keeps happening?
Yeah.
Right, and then maybe you'll actually catch it.
Yeah.
Especially if there's a pattern where I know it's like the same place, same time of day, literally, like, I can tell you when it's gonna happen there.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, because I think this is the same issue I had last year, and I'm having it again, which is if you want this position, you have to have thought it through and know what the steps are and how it's gonna work and how it's gonna be enforced and like how, and that we still don't know, right? Because again, the code enforcement officer driving around is the same as a police officer driving around.
Yeah. Well, maybe when we have that, sit down, which was sort of focused on fishing, but it's an
Yeah.
opportunity
Yeah.
to ask, okay, let's just revisit this particular point.
It's the same thing with fishing though, right? It's
Yeah,
gonna
no,
be the
it's-
same.
it is the
Yeah,
same
it's the
thing. Well,
same.
that's
How
what-
are you
yeah.
gonna, no, I think it makes
Yeah.
sense to have it there.
It didn't come up, the one thing I thought about was the argument for the code enforcement is like, if we're talking about like over policing, you're putting somebody who's like a civilian versus an actual officer who is carrying a taser. That is like a little less intimidating, and I that part I did like about it. I don't wanna spend an extra $15,000, but there is an argument on it.
Yeah, but the thing is that that's what I was saying, the point of community policing, right? Community policing is supposed to not be threatening, whatever, because
Right.
they're gonna spend the time, that was part of why when we talked in the police review committee about more walking around, right? Less time just in the car, because of course, you're not gonna get to know the people. And then, and the bikes, right? That was the point of the bikes, so
Yeah,
that they wouldn't be in cars all the time. So I think it's a little bit of, let's think about how this might be done, and if they're already doing educational programs, it's sort of the same thing, right? You could reshift that time to, we're gonna spend some time on bikes in Halsey Pond,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I
We're
mean, I
gonna
think
spend
regardless
some
of what we do,
time-
we should
yeah.
do that.
Right, we're gonna spend
Yeah.
some time in the woods on the bikes, right? The same education time that you can spend somewhere else,
Mhm.
you're gonna specifically spend it there, so you're not worrying that those
Yeah.
people are, that you have the 2 other patrol cars that
Yeah.
are out ready for responding to crime in Irvington.
I think like letting people know, because like they're doing it kind of like spot, when they go to a park and they catch a couple people, but like, if you like actually inform people that this is a thing that we should be talking about, and actually just the advertisements might actually be helpful, because it's getting in people's heads that this is an issue, and then actually do the event as well. I don't know, I'd love to see if it has some results.
So they've done some of that, right? So part of the review committee too, remember this was like, they used to do a lot of stuff that was nowhere. So
Yeah.
they've been much better about their social media, actually, like if you, they're like better, I'm sure they have maybe they have a website too, but I see it, I have them on my
Yeah.
social media, so I get like, which I think is nice, because you get updates on what they do, like when they did Coffee with a Cop, or, when they do other things with the
Those are nice
kids,
things.
yeah,
That's great.
it's nice, because
Right,
they used to
that's
do
true,
that
I
and
think
do none of, and it was nowhere, so
Right.
that's a.
Very recently, you're right, it was, those were some really nice things they've done.
Yeah, and Charlotte had the request too, which I think is a good idea about, putting like having their website updated and putting pictures of
Yeah.
Oh, I
who's on
saw
staff.
that, that was a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes hand in hand with like just knowing who your officers are and, identifying them. But,
Those relationships like really gave a lot of benefits. We do a lot with my working schools, like we have relationships with a lot of the community police officers. We invite them to come to events, they get to know the police officers, and it really helps like make them less intimidating, and you have a relationship, and you're like more willing to work with the police instead of it being adversarial. But it's like a very positive.
Yeah, I mean, my kids grew up with some of the police and being coaches and things of that sort, so they knew him. If he's, when he was small, my youngest, when he was small, wandered down the street, they would know his name. which was nice.
It is nice, I think it has a lot of benefits for both sides, you know.
Okay, anything else? All right, then I will make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
All right, all in favor?
Double
Aye.
Thank you, everybody online who's sick. I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Enjoy the park. Have a good night.